What's going on, guys? It's illumignostic, and we got to talk about aliens today because there's some really crazy stuff going on, and some people are definitely talking about it. There's some conversation happening, but given the scale of the developments and the sort of things that are happening, the response doesn't really seem commensurate with the stuff that's going down, right? The most recent incident being, I believe it was Vegas, although I can't be 100% positive about that. It could have been Arizona, but at any rate, these cops got caught a green blob crashing down from the sky on their body cams, and then those same cops were an hour later sent to a 911 call where a kid is heard saying that there are 8 to 10 foot, obviously non-human beings in the driveway. There were a couple of other calls in the area regarding these beings being on people's roofs and whatnot. And the interesting thing about this is that the kid and the family corroborated everything he said, the entire rest of his family. On top of all that, they did not see this crash. And so if you watch the video, you can tell the cops are taking it seriously because it seems at least that they're cognizant of the fact that this kid doesn't know that this green blob crashed nearby. So that's a hell of a coincidence if, a UFO crashes or something crashes, green light crashes into the ground. And then there are reports that there are alien beings in the area. Of course, this raises a whole ton of other questions, and it's really important to maintain skepticism because we really don't know what's going on, and there's all kinds of ideas out there. People from the Christian right, and a lot of people don't realize that that's where this stuff is coming from, but it is because the Christians feel threatened. I'm sure Islamic people, probably anyone that's religious. May have issues with the idea that the Earth is not the center of the universe and that it's not flat and that there are beings on other planets. And so they have created this conspiracy theory that it's a fake, staged psyop that Operation Bluebeam or Paperclip or, whatever it is, an extension of MK Ultra, whatever it is, and of course it's just, almost unthinkably stupid to believe that the Earth is the only planet that has intelligent life on it. And, there are some other logical problems with the idea that there are aliens here. The most obvious being that traveling the kind of distances that are required for interstellar travel, interplanetary travel even are, it's a bit ridiculous. And even if you assume that these beings are so advanced that they have technology that allows them to move at the speed of light, which is the maximum possible speed, you still are going to have the passage of time on their home planet, right? If you're moving at the speed of light, no time. So from your point of view, it would be like teleporting from one star system or one planet to another. But your planet would still, 700 million years would pass or whatever it is, and you could never go home. And so, there are some ideas that there are wormholes that could be opened or that there's interdimensional travel or teleporting that's possible. And, my opinion on this is that if you look at the telescopic nature of the evolutionary paradigm and how things sort of exponentially accelerate because there is this like compacting of momentum, right? It's just faster and faster and faster. 100,000 years from hunter and gatherer to agriculture, 100 years or 1,000 years from 10,000 years. So 100,000 years, then 10,000 years from agriculture to the development of basic technology. And then we have computers in only 100 years. And then now, we have all sorts of crazy technology. And that, you could say from computers to AI has only been 50 years or something. So the technology just continues to accelerate faster and faster and faster. And then you can adjust some variables, right? You can look at the fact that conditions and histories are not necessarily going to be completely parallel from one planet to another. So what that could mean is that perhaps you have a planet where consciousness and gnosis and maybe some type of psychedelic or whatever it is, that development was parallel to the development of their technology. You could also find it to be true that no meteor hit this planet, no asteroid hit this planet, right? So they have been developing for 10 million years with uninterrupted. So if we look at the scale of our existence and we say, okay, so we've had technology for 150 years, whatever it is. What if we had technology and we were developing our consciousness in step with that for even 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years or 1,000,000,000 years? What I'm getting at there is that these races of alien beings could be so advanced that we cannot even comprehend, what their mentality would be, the kind of technology that they could have. We do know that there are folds and bends in space-time, possibly holes. So, bottom line is that we actually do need to be open to these possibilities, realistically, that, there could be beings that are just so advanced that even though we can't see our way around some of the impediments to interstellar travel and interplanetary travel, that doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. It means jack shit. You know what I mean? Because our understanding of the universe and particle physics and space-time, the nature of it and the function and limitations and possible permutations and all of this stuff, we are just in a very elementary stage compared to a race of people or whatever they are that has been around for 100,000 years, million years, even 1,000,000,000 years. It could be a really, really old race, right? So, definitely can't rule anything out along those lines, although there are some things that are extremely unlikely. And I am going to get to my own contact story in a minute, and we're going to look at some of the prophecies involving Sirius and the Blue Star that are weirdly ubiquitous throughout different cultures, and even some experiences that I had with ayahuasca where I received information regarding a specific planet and some astrophysics that I would not have known. Like I'd never studied that at all, not even a little bit. But the information that I received turned out to be exactly accurate, and no one on Earth had it yet. But it did turn out to be true. And then later I found out that the Sequoia, who are one of the ayahuasca drinking tribes here, also communicate with beings on that same planet when they drink ayahuasca. Or at least that's what they believe. So we're going to talk about all that stuff because, this is something that I have been unwittingly, I guess, involved with by way of experience for a couple of decades. I've had a number of unbelievable experiences that relate to all of this. And I think these developments with this recent sighting and the U.S. government disclosing that it has indeed captured a craft of non-human origin, their words. And again, I mean, why in the hell is this not like the biggest news ever? It's just completely mind-blowing that people, and I'm sorry if this seems negative to you, but why are people such cowards? That's the only explanation that I can come up with for this the determination to keep these Bronze Age myths and, with their spiritual bypassing and toxic psychology and the political parties that are obviously just one party with the same overlords, and people just are such chicken shits that they're just in denial about everything. And when something extraordinary happens, if it's scary in any way, they just stick their heads in the sand. I mean, that's the only explanation I can come up with. I have no idea how to explain that in any other terms. And for me, life would be unlivable without the mysterious and the mystery and the unknowable, and the journey of figuring things out and making discoveries. And, you know, even the process of honing the craft of balancing critical thinking and open-mindedness. And, you know, I mean, this is apparently an incredibly rare skill these days, and it just boggles my mind. These things should be all fundamental parts of the human experience and embraced and celebrated, and I just don't know what to think of it. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to say is that, you know, the Pentagon had, I think it was like 3 years ago, they started calling, what do you call it, Congress, for an hour a day. They were testifying before Congress, an hour a day, you know, debriefing Congress, saying, you know, we have all of this video now, all of these pilots, you know, all this crazy stuff that we cannot explain. These craft move in ways that defy our understanding of physics. They come up out of the waters sometimes, you know, and this is NASA and the CIA debriefing, and the military debriefing Congress. So, I mean, it's seems like the cat's out of the bag. And again, I'm just sort of choking on my words because I'm still stunned that nobody cares. At least not as many people as you would think. But so that's where we're at this point. There are also, a few years ago, the Mexican military released some video that appear to be like these, you know, those balls that you put your hand on, and there's it looks like Bob Lazar was telling the truth, probably. But then he went off the deep end and lost his mind and became an egomaniac and made a bunch of shit up. So at one point, Bob Lazar was probably telling the truth, and, you know, now he's gone off the deep end. But yeah, those balls that you put your hand on and the electric, it shoots to it. You know, I don't know what they're called. They kind of look like that, only with a like blob around them, and they were chasing Mexican fighter jets around. And the Mexican military released the video and said, you know, this is real, and we don't know what the hell it is. There were the British Prime Minister, also a number of years ago said something about the U.S. having been in contact with extraterrestrials. There was a really famous incident that I mentioned in my tool reaction video, where this guy called the George Norrie show. And this wouldn't be impressive if it wasn't for how the call ended, right? And there's a recording of this conversation on, I think, Lateralis. It could be Anima, but I think it's on Lateralis. And it's called, interestingly, Faip Daoid, which is Enochian, which are interdimensionals or angelic beings, this language they supposedly speak, for voice of God. I believe that's the track name for this phone call, because what the guy says is that the U.S. government has been in contact with what they thought were aliens that actually turned out to be interdimensionals with bad intentions. And he goes on to say there's going to be all these natural disasters. The government knows they're coming, but they don't move the people. They're just going to let them stay there so they can reduce the population and make it more manageable. So, you know, this is like 1997, and this guy is talking about a lot of the things that we've observed since then. So not only does that kind of give us some reason to think that this phone call could have legitimately been from an Area 51 employee. You know, he was saying, I don't have a lot of time. They're going to triangulate my position at any moment. But at the in the middle of this phone call, the satellite that it hosted several different radio stations, and the power on that block cut off. So, you know, what was that? They made absolutely sure that telephone call was cut short, it seems like. I actually had some experiences way back in 2001, I guess, was the first thing that occurred that is related to this subject, although it's arguable whether it was legitimately aliens or not, because mushrooms were definitely involved. But, you know, anyone that has read Terence McKenna and is familiar with his idea of what this phenomena really is, it doesn't necessarily delegitimize just because there were psychedelics involved. In fact, if it's true that the that psychedelic compounds actually deactivate a filtration system in our nervous system, we may be able to perceive more of the full spectrum of light, right? We only perceive less than 1%. And so I was actually told by this Native American Sundance chief named Golden Light Eagle, and we're going to get to that story in a moment, that their ships are cloaked in a spectrum of light that is not detectable by our eyes or our equipment. And so that could actually explain why it is that people see UFOs when they've taken relatively low doses of mushrooms. Anyone that's eaten mushrooms knows that you don't really have hallucinations of UFOs unless you've eaten an awful lot or are completely schizophrenic. So at any rate, basically I was introduced to these aliens on this ship as the Galactic Federation, and interestingly, the Prime Minister of Israel, hold on, let me try to figure out why this is. I'm just going to turn it off because this happens every time I turn it on. The Israeli Prime Minister said that these aliens are actually the Galactic Federation. So when I saw that this Israeli Prime Minister used the same terminology to describe this alien brotherhood, that they introduced themselves to me as, that really kind of struck a chord. So yeah, let's start at the beginning of my personal experiences with this stuff. The first one, mushrooms were involved, but the next time something like this happened, I was not taking any psychedelics at all during that period. So bear with me if you feel like psychedelics make this stuff irrelevant. I don't think so, especially considering what's happening. But basically what happened is that I think I was 21 years old or something. So we're talking like 13. Oh, wait, no, 22 years ago. Oh my God, 23 years ago. Yeah, like 2000, I guess. I ate an entire burrito, like a large tortilla full of psilocybin mushrooms. And I don't know why I did this, because my body was telling me, you're overstuffed. Like I literally couldn't fit anymore. But for some reason, I was totally determined to get this entire burrito down. It was an ungodly amount of mushrooms. And part of the reason that I overestimated or underestimated or whatever is that the mushrooms were not totally dry. And that sort of helped me to miscalculate how much I was eating. And so I blacked out in a sense. My body was still running around doing weird things. My partner at the time, my ex-wife, said that I walked over from the kitchen and she asked me for a glass of water, and I went and got Parmesan cheese. And when she pointed out that it wasn't water, she said I just took the top off and dumped it on the carpet. I don't remember any of this because I was on a spaceship. And I was talking to these aliens that were dressed in totally normal business suits. And it wasn't like, when I was on this ship, it wasn't like I was tripping. Everything looked normal and crystal clear. And I can still recall every detail of this as if it happened yesterday. So by the way, you guys, there's an awful lot of people here. So hit the like button, share, subscribe, join our Patreon. We're doing a secret stream after this, which is where I share the deepest and most profound stuff that I am aware of with my patrons, who we really appreciate because we're demonetized. So I'm talking to these aliens, and I remember the first thing I asked them is, why are you guys dressed in business suits? Like, what is that about? Or like, why do you look so normal? And they're like, don't worry about that. We can take whatever form we want. But we just don't want you to be distracted by that right now. So we just wanted to tell you, that, cause this was right after 9/11. So it must've been 2001. That you're worried about the Patriot Act and the New World Order and the human race destroying itself and all that. So we just wanted to tell you that you shouldn't worry about it, at least not to the extent that you're concerned about some kind of finality to the adversity that humanity's facing, because there are the Star Tribes. We're the Galactic Federation, which is a group of different alien races that kind of guide the development of the evolution of different species around the universe. And there are rules, so we can't intervene until you're literally on the brink of self-destruction, but only at the last moment. Only at what's going on, Brahman? Only at the very last moment can we intervene. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this right now, because this wasn't the last time I would hear this. And the next time I wasn't high. And I had just seen a Native American shaman call the wind, so totally different context for the next story. But it seems to me that we are on the brink of annihilation, and the aliens are here, just as I was told they would be. So that really strikes me as, interesting, that I received this information from these apparently shape-shifting entities. And then they told me, you're not going to be happy when you wake up. So we're going to let you have some fun now. And they opened up the back of the spaceship, and I went riding out of it on an electric guitar, and I was surfing this wave of pure music, and the spirit of Jerry Garcia flew up beside me on his guitar, and he's like, this is what I do now. And then he flew away, and then I woke up, and I was staring at a pencil drawing of a naked woman with exaggerated breasts, and I was like, oh, I see. I wandered down to the laundry room, and because the mushrooms just like wore off like that. Like I just totally snapped out of it. And then I saw the toilet, and that started to concern me because I knew that there weren't toilets in the laundry room, and it slowly started to dawn on me that I was in jail. Apparently, while I was on the ship talking to aliens, I had wandered outside, and some cops found me, and I was spouting poetry, and they tackled me and took me to jail for being weird. And yeah, so that's how that story ended. But so now fast forward about 10 years, I guess. Didn't really think too much of this experience. I mean, I was way, way, way out there on mushrooms. I just thought, it was interesting, but I didn't take it too seriously. And I was still living in Colorado, in southwestern Colorado, a place that, coincidentally is pretty well known for alien contact. There's a place called, what is that little town? The biggest thing in it is a Masonic temple. It's like this crappy rundown Aztec, New Mexico, I think. And there's, this site where there is a big concrete block, and it is sunk way down in the ground. And you would do that if you had to leverage something to pull something very large. And I guess in like 1930 something or early 1940s, a craft crashed there, and the military came, and several farmers, some of whom still lived there at the time, although very, very old. They said that they had witnessed 3 aliens extricated from these craft by the government, and that block was there to attach a crane to, and yeah, so that's that story. And so I was going through a really interesting phase in my life, kind of a rapid and intense spiritual awakening period that I came to refer to as the Phoenix process. I've made a bunch of videos about that. And so you can check those out if you like. And at some point in the early stages of this process, my roommate got an email from this guy named Golden Light Eagle, who was wearing a very, very long feather dress, Native American chap, Sundance chief. Sundances are super brutal. Sundances where you put hooks through your chest and dance around a pole for 3 days with no water. So pretty intense stuff. And he was inviting people to come to Farmington, New Mexico, and have some sort of conference. And I didn't really care what exactly it was about, because I just thought, well, he's saying there's going to be representatives from all these different tribes, and so I got to go see what this is about. Thank you so much, Stephen. Consider becoming a patron. We're down 25% this month. We've got to get those numbers back up there so I can justify making content. And I think the best content is probably the secret stuff. That's what I try to do anyways. So where was I at with this? Farmington, New Mexico. So yeah, we didn't I didn't know that it was about aliens, or I had no idea. So but I called him to get directions though, instead of, I don't know, I didn't use the internet much in 2011, if you can believe that, but I didn't really know about Google Maps or whatever. So I actually just called him, and I asked for directions. And before he got off the phone, this was the first really weird thing that happened in this sequence of events. Before he got off the phone, he said, "Bring your little native friend with you." And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but I said, okay. And I hung up the phone. And as soon as I hung up the phone, it rang again. And this Danae, well, you would call them Navajo, probably, Navajo girl that I didn't really know very well. It's not like we would go hang out or whatever. She called as soon as I hung up, and I said, "Hey, do you want to go to this thing with me?" And I tried my best to explain. I was like, I know there are going to be Native Americans from different tribes there, but I don't really know what it is. And she said, "Yeah, sure. Here's my address." And I realized right away that it was literally on one of the roads to the hotel. So we pulled over, picked her up, kept going. I get there and I get out of the car, and this guy locks eyes with me. And it was as if this electrical charge was exchanged between us. And it was really weird. And he says, "Man, I haven't seen you in like 40,000 years." And I was like, "What?" And he grabbed me by the arm, took me around behind the hotel where they were having the conference. And there was this Hawaiian guy in a red jumpsuit, and he assembles this circle of 12 people, 13 including him. And he goes through this sort of chant where he's making this low sound similar to throat singing, or like a Buddhist monk chant. And he was telling people to harmonize and just let the words come. And so all of us, including myself, I actually said, I don't really know how to sing harmony, and I don't know what I'm supposed to say. And he's just like, "Just do it." And sure enough, words came out of my mouth. And then after that, he said, "May the wind blow to confirm the power of our prayers." And the wind blew so hard that gravel blew across the parking lot. So at that point, I'm like, okay. And this is literally like what I just told you is pretty much how I experienced it. It happened that fast. So I barely had time to get out of the car before things went, rabbit hole fucking weird on me. And so I was like the weirdest person in this circle. There was like a school teacher and, all these really normal people that were just, they were more disturbed by it than I was. So it was a hell of an entry to make. And so we go in to listen to Golden Light Eagle speak, and he starts talking about the star tribes and how there are these interdimensional beings that the native cultures and ancient cultures around the world have been in contact with for thousands and thousands of years, and that they basically transmit this knowledge that a lot of our innovations and discoveries didn't actually, people think they're thinking of this stuff, the way they say it just suddenly popped into my head. Well, that's because it didn't come from you. It popped into my head complete. That's a transmission. And so he's talking about that, and then he starts talking about the 1111 frequencies. And, it was 2011, which is one of those little synchronicities, but much, much crazier. In the weeks leading up to this interaction with Golden Light Eagle, we were experiencing incredibly insane synchronicities, one after another, and I mean like borderline impossible. A couple of quick examples. I have a brother I haven't spoken to in like 8 years, and I started thinking a lot about Aleister Crowley. And like within 2 or 3 days after getting interested in Aleister Crowley, my brother sends me I haven't heard from him in 8 years, a postcard of Aleister Crowley with a reindeer nose on, saying, "Do as thou wilt, as long as thou wilt have a Merry Christmas." So I called my brother, and we were on the same page of the same Aleister Crowley book 4. We haven't seen each other in 7 or 8 years, haven't even spoken. So, that was one instance. Another really crazy one was the 1111 ruler. My girlfriend was an artist, and she asked me about the numerology of the number 11. So I start telling her what I know. We're talking about it, and the song 11 by Tool comes on. The I don't know if that's the name of the song, but he's like, 11, you are the voice that's been calling me back, ho, 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 home, or something like that. And she has a 24-inch ruler, and she's down there drawing, and she starts like getting irritated. I'm like, what is your problem? And she says, I don't know what the fuck, and then she just freezes. There were two 11s printed on the ruler, and one of them was printed where 23 should be, 23 being a number that's associated with synchronicity. So it was like a double whammy. Of course, the crazy thing about that is that, it's not like a human made that ruler. It's coming from a mold, and it's hard to believe that this company could manufacture a mold and then have all these rulers get out that have this misprint on them. It just defies belief, but it sure the hell was there the next day still, you know what I mean? And then so the next day we are leaving to go to work, and a murder of crows, she asked me, what is a murder of crows? And I just pointed, and there was a murder of crows in the tree there. It landed right after, like a split second after she asked. So I get to work, we go to the job site, and I'm pulling apart the awning on a deck, and I reach up into the insulation and pull it out after my girlfriend calls, the same girl with the ruler, right? And she says, hey, I just took a picture of 4 bears in the tree out front. And I had her on speakerphone just because I was trying to stay busy and talk to her. So my coworkers heard her say this. And then I'm like, all right, cool, I got to get back to work. I hang up the phone, I pull the insulation out, and 3 bear claws drop out onto the deck. So I'm going, that's got to be parrot or something. That can't fucking be real. And my coworker comes over and says, no, those sure as shit are bear claws. I just shot one yesterday. And, so that kind of stuff was happening very, 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 very often. And it was way over the top, all of it, all the time. It got to be actually pretty stressful because it shouldn't have been real, and it should have happened once or something and then stopped. And that's not what happened. So when Golden Light Eagle starts talking about 1111, after this experience with this ruler, I'm going, okay, we have some conceptual continuity here with these synchronicities. There is a story being told. There is symmetry and order that is expressing itself in some pretty incredible ways. And remember, I had not been exposed to pop culture stuff. I don't even know if it was existed back then in 2011 on the internet. Certainly not in the quantity that it does today. I had never heard of 1111. It was completely new to me. So it's not like I had it in my head or something. And that's been remarkable as well, because I've seen a lot of the ideas that bubbled up, like seeing numbers in strings of 3, and then like you notice that there's an alignment with a feeling. Like 111 is actually in gematria, it is truth plus love plus unity, and it equals the same numerical value as God. So that's 111. And 444 is the number of initiation. You'll see that a lot. But, we had never, I'd never heard anything about this. Interestingly, while we're talking about it, I recently found an interview with Maynard James Keenan from Tool, where he actually says, when people first start eating mushrooms or are awakening a little bit, maybe in college, one of the most common things that will happen is that they'll see these numbers in strings of 3. And they'll realize that there's a meaning connected to it. It blew my mind because it was from like 1996. So, that kind of like drove home, like, this is just what happens when you pry open your third eye, apparently. And so back to the story with Golden Light Eagle and these Native Americans, they basically told us about the star tribes, and they told us that some of us are telepathically linked to these interdimensional beings, and we don't even realize it. I would experience that is true in some pretty incredible ways over the coming months and years. I mean, crazy. So the conference ends. I'm driving home, and for the first time, I see this like purple geisha, like demon looking vision just kind of in my mind's eye. I mean, my eyes were open. It's weird. It's like, it wasn't like solid. and it wasn't in my head or out of my head, but I could perceive it. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. And it was really beautiful, and I only used the word demon because it had horns. It didn't strike me as evil. There was nothing, and it didn't move or anything. It was like a still picture or painting, kind of cartoony, so maybe a painting. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I just kept driving, and there were a lot of weird things. Like we drove by a herd of elk, and they were all laying down, which I had never seen before. All of the whole entire 500 of them or whatever were laying down with their legs tucked underneath of them and facing the road. Super weird. It struck me as significant at the time. I don't really know if it actually was, but so I guess maybe 2 days later, I'm driving down the road, and I get a call from a girl that was associated with this Star Tribe group, not the aliens, the Native Americans, and she says, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you about this dream that I had, where I was on this UFO, and these guys in business suits were telling me that, there's a lot of scary stuff happening in the world, but that they will intervene at the very last moment, but there are rules and they can't until the very last moment." And I just kind of was quiet for a second because I did not tell her my story. And for those of you that might just be tuning in, I had the same exact thing happen when I ate like a half ounce of mushrooms 10 years earlier. Down to almost the word. I mean, it was exactly the same description, the same everything. And so I was just quiet for a second, and I said, "So why are you telling me this?" I didn't know her. There was no like hookup energy going on or anything. It was just like, I don't even know why I gave her my number, just being friendly. And so, yeah, why the hell are you telling me about this? And then I got silence on the other end. She goes, "I have no idea." And so I kind of took that as like an indication from the universal mind that I should take this seriously, and that something actually could be happening, and that these the Golden Light Eagle and his companions were probably telling the truth. And so I probably should have told you the story about how Golden Light Eagle telepathically guided me to his room because I didn't bring any money and I didn't want to drive home. And I heard his voice in my head, and he told me, "Go to room 331 and sleep there." And I went up there. The doors open a crack. I go in. There's leaves crumbled up on the table and oil everywhere. And his necklace is in the TV stand. So it's obviously his room. And we slept there. No one showed up. And, so... lots, and I'm not going to go into it all because this isn't about that. We're trying to talk about the alien aspect, but it was like that the whole fucking time that we were there with them. So they made a very good case for taking them seriously. So I get the call from the girl, trying to stay, chronologically coherent here. And then it was maybe, I don't know, a month later, if that even, I had joined a secret society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Stellamatatina lineage. Israel Regedy was a member. William Butler Yeats, it's one of the legitimate Masonic lineages that, Aleister Crowley was a member of it. And we were driving home, my same girlfriend still, and I got a call from... what was that guy's name? Robert, who was the head of the order at the time. And he says, "Contact is imminent." And he hangs up. And I had him on speakerphone, so my partner heard it too. So we get home, and we were living in this adobe house with heated floors and really nice in this really beautiful valley in Colorado. It was just absolutely extraordinary place to be while all this was happening. And the front half of the house was glass, so you could see outside. And I get out of the car and I walk inside and I close the door, and I see this like translucent 4.5 foot tall being run by the windows. And I looked back at my girlfriend, and her eyes were super wide. So I was like, "You saw that, didn't you?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "All right, let's go to the bedroom. Let's get out of here." So we went back to the bedroom, and at the time I had a Scottish Terrier pit bull. And he was sitting on the bed. And if you've ever seen someone get knocked out, their eyes roll up in their head and they start snoring. So we're sitting there like, what do we do? And she's going like, let's go out and talk to them. And I'm like, I've had enough of this shit. I'm not going out there. I don't care. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I don't care. I'm over it. I'm going to sleep. And the dog suddenly rolls his eyes up in his head and falls over snoring like he's been knocked out by Mike Tyson or something. So, he never did that before. He never did it again. And it occurred to me that they had just turned the dog off. And still, I really have no idea why the hell they would need to do that, because they seem to me to be almost like holographic projections or, light body, which is one of the ideas that I've had about, how they might get around. There's this practice in the Western occult tradition where you formulate a light body and then you send it out to go and do stuff for you because it can move at the speed of light. And so this is something that magicians do. And it occurred to me that if this is something we figured out a few hundred years ago, maybe a few thousand years ago, there could be a race of aliens that had figured it out 100,000 years ago, were super good at it. And that's why these beings were translucent. Because they're not physically here, and that solves a whole lot of problems in terms of trying to figure out how they travel around. The one thing that messes with me is that we have so many reports of crafts. I've seen several times what appear to be craft, including this little teardrop silver shaped thing. And you guys can find this on YouTube. This shit is crazy because remember the guy, the Golden Light Eagle, and those other natives were saying, you're telepathically linked to these beings, right? So this guy, African-American gentleman, contacted this news agency and he's like, hey, I can call these ships with my mind, send a news crew. And they humored him and they sent the news crew out. And the fucking thing showed up and it looked exactly like the one that I've seen. It was the same exact, like pointed on the end, sort of teardrop shaped, tiny little thing, whip out behind a cloud and then go back behind the cloud. It's exactly what I saw it do. And here again, we have this apparent telepathic link between this person and this thing. But back to the aliens in my house scenario, we could hear their footsteps, which was also weird because they didn't seem to be physically there, but this pitter-patter of extremely rapid feet running around the house. And so the dog is knocked out. My girlfriend's going, I want to go out there and see. And I don't know how I did this, but I pulled the blankets up over my head and I went to sleep. Because I had just, so much shit had been happening. I just didn't want anything to do with it. And when I woke up, there was this extraordinarily otherworldly music coming from my weed garden out there. And I didn't go look at that either. But then I went out to my living room and I picked up Aleister Crowley's book 4 and just glanced at it for some reason. And it says, the master awakes in a heavily scented garden where he is hearing the strangest music. And I just slammed the book shut. I'm like, this just will not stop. I'm just done. So I had something to do. I think maybe band practice, way out in the desert. So I went out to this guy's house, and this dude's dad was super, super rich. Left him a ton of money. So he had this huge garage full of guitars and all these amplifiers, right? So after practice, I asked him, how did you build all these amplifiers? Did you read a bunch about it? And he goes, no, I can't read at all, actually. I'm so dyslexic, I've never read a book. And I was like, so what the fuck? How did you do this? And he said, well, I was abducted by aliens when I was 9, right? And so I'm like, oh yeah, fucking of course you were. So he tells me this and he says, yeah, they downloaded how their ships work. And there are these magnets that kind of roll around with that's how they steer their vessels. And then he starts going into all this detail about, the electromagnetic frequency that compels these things and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there going wait a minute, dude has never read a book. How? I mean, it sounded like a military debriefing from somebody who had just deconstructed and analyzed a spacecraft. It was insane. And this is, the day after these things have been in my house. So then he pulls his pant leg up and he has these scoops that are taken out from his ankle where it was perfectly half of a sphere and they were in a perfect triangle and it looked just like Pythagoras's tetractys, where the 3 dots in the triangle that the Masons put between letters, Couldn't help but notice that. And so I leave. And I get another call from Robert at the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And he says, I have a task for you. And at this point, I'm thinking of myself as like I had not formally taken initiation. I was like a probationer. So I was like, okay, what is it? And he said, I need you to get to a computer. It wasn't as common for people to have smartphones then. And I don't think I even knew that they existed. So I said, okay, I'll go find a computer. So I go over to this guy's house, this older gentleman. He was a Mexican guy, and he was a gangbanger when he was younger. He was a straight up killer, and his brother had been murdered. And I knew he had a lot of anger, and he was still really upset about this for obvious reasons. And so I go over to Joe's house because I remember he had just told me that he got a brand new computer, and I was right next to his house. So I stopped in there and went upstairs, and I said, hey, Joe, do you mind if I use your computer real quick? I got to do something. He's like, well, what is it? And I said, I don't really know. There's this, just let me use your computer. And so we go into the computer, and we bring up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's website, which is where I called Robert. He tells me to go there. I go there. And there's a picture of McGregor Mathers, who is one of the founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, on the website. And Joe, his eyes bug out, and he goes, that's my fucking brother. And I was like, what? That's McGregor. And he's like, no, that's my brother. And I'm like, what are you talking? It's not your brother, dude. Did your brother wear robes? He's like, it's my brother. He was freaking out. And I'm on the phone with Robert, and I'm like, okay, what the hell is this? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to pay some fee or something? Do I need to fill out a form? Like, what the fuck am I doing here? And he's like, no, none of that. And then it hit me that I was supposed to help Joe forgive the guy that killed his brother. And just for the sake of clarity, at this point in my journey with intuition and, shamanism and ritual magic and all of this stuff, I'm not saying that Robert knew exactly what was going on, or, you know what I mean? Or that he was like remotely viewing or anything like that. What actually happens is that you just kind of get an impulse, that is connected to someone. And at least in my experience, it's like you don't really know exactly what it is that you're doing, but you know what to do. And that's my analysis of this, that the universal mind is actually what's behind it. Or it could just be outrageous level of coincidence, but this is what happened. So I said, okay, I get it. I hung up the phone, and I said, Joe, can we go out in the living room, smoke a bowl, and have a conversation? And he's like, sure, yeah, whatever. And he was still kind of freaked out, though. He's like, this is fucking weird, man. Like, who the hell were you on the phone with? Why is my brother on this website? Like, what the fuck is going on? So I start actually channeling, which is something I don't even believe in, really. And I kind of explain it by saying that, I think we could be on a telepathic feedback loop with people. So I take a hit of the weed to help me to tune in to Joe. And I asked him who Christine was. And he's like, that's the bitch that got my brother shot. And I'm like, what about this Mexican name that I don't remember anymore? And he's like, that was their dog. And his eyes are getting wider and wider and wider. And later his son told me that he was so freaked out, he was considering going in the bedroom, getting a shotgun and blowing my head off, because he's still a gangster. And he was Catholic. And he's like, this dude is possessed. Got to put a stop to this. Don't worry, we are getting back to the aliens in a minute, with the same person even, which is just a whole nother level of insane. But so I go through this process with him, and finally I get him to at least say that he has forgiven the person that killed his brother, who was dead anyways. He couldn't go kill him and get revenge or whatever. So and in the moment he forgave him, this thing that looked like a mosquito hawk but was way too big came out of the lampshade and like drifted past Joe's head. And I'm not saying it was the soul of this dude's brother in some weird form, but I don't know what in the fuck it could have been. It was huge. Joe saw it. His eyes bugged out even more. I mean, the poor guy, he's 70 years old. I come over doing all this weird shit to him, and it was rough on him, but not as rough as what was going to happen in a couple of days. And I think I actually got part of this out of sequence. But so the thing flies out the window. At first, Joe pulled his hand back like he's going to smash it. The thing goes out the window, and I leave. So I think the sequence of events actually was that was first. And then the night after the aliens came to our house, or interdimensionals or whatever they were, I went over to Joe's house for an unrelated reason. Had nothing to do with his computer this time. I just wanted to give you the backstory of my, previous encounter with Joe, because it was just as weird as the rest of the stuff. And I walk up to his house, and he's sitting on his porch in tears. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? And he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. And remember, this is the night after I saw the interdimensionals. My girlfriend saw the interdimensionals or aliens or whatever they were. And he says, there was this thing on my roof, and it was like 4 feet tall. It seemed like almost like you could see through it. So he also perceived it to be translucent. And he said he threw a rock at it, but the rock vanished as if it went into another dimension instead of hitting the alien or whatever the hell they are. And so I didn't even tell him. That they came to our house last night too. We saw them exactly the same way. I just got in my car and I left. And I needed to go and talk to my friend Clinton, who was the singer in my band at the time. So I went by his work, and our sound man worked at a building in the same parking lot. And I go to talk to Clint, and he's like, man, you're not going to believe this shit. Topher last night, I let him borrow Tool's CD 10,000 Days, and there's track number 11. I think it's track number 11, but it's definitely 11 minutes and 11 seconds long. I didn't notice that until a year later. But it starts out with the Native American chant, and then it goes into this story of alien contact that's 11 minutes and 11 seconds long. And I don't know if they did that deliberately. I would think so. But he said that Topher said that he was listening to the CD, but he never got to the 11th track, which is an alien encounter story. Because he said that he was sitting on his toilet and he felt something touch him, and he looked over and there was this little 4-foot translucent guy with big black eyes that touched him. And when it touched him, he disappeared from his bathroom and he was in another place, and then he doesn't remember anything. And then he was back in his bathroom, but he never got to that 11th track. And when, or whatever number it is, but when Clinton told him, dude, that song is actually about alien contact, he said he looked like he was going to throw up. Like he was really upset. And I didn't tell Clint either. I didn't say, dude, last night, same things came to our house. So then I go home, and I owed my friend, who was a pot grower, money. I don't know why, but he was a pot grower, and I owed him money. So he comes over to my house, and he has his kid with him. And I open the door, and he comes in, and he says, man, you're not going to believe what we saw last night. And I just kind of looked at him like, try me. And he says, there was like this 4-foot long kind of gray translucent being that ran into our pot garden. And his kid is like, yeah, it was crazy. And the kid is 9 years old. You know what I mean? So the same night that we had this encounter with these translucent 4-foot tall beings that turned off my dog, every single person that I ran into the next day had encountered them and described them exactly the same way. About a year later, I went by Joe's new apartment, the older Mexican gangbanger guy, and he starts talking about the aliens, right? And he says all this stuff that is the same message that I got, that the Star Tribe girl received in the dream, called me and told me. And when he was done, on this like weird spontaneous rant about the agenda of these aliens, I'm like, why the hell do you know this? Like, what happened? Did they come back? Like, what is this? And he says, no, man, ever since that day that I saw that alien, I've just known this shit. And you got to remember, man, all of us, like, I was definitely the most counterculture, like, weird person out of this group. Even the pot grower guy, like short hair, and he was just kind of a normal guy that just happened to grow weed. He wasn't, you know what I mean? He wasn't very out there or anything. And Joe was he was pretty much how you would expect a sort of reformed, biker gang, Mexican gangbanger would be. He was cool to an extent, but he was not the kind of person that, was into this kind of stuff, or it was insane. But it doesn't stop there. It does not stop there. So let's see, where are we in this story? So eventually the stuff starts to kind of taper down just a little bit. But I ended up moving to California with this girl. And I think the first thing that happened is that this one night we were laying on the deck and I started talking about all these experiences and saying that, oh, it had happened before, I guess, where I was talking about it. And then I saw one of those little, at night, it looks like a star. And they do all these insane maneuvers that make no sense. Just really weird, like almost like a UFO doing donuts or something. It just doesn't make, I don't know why they would do it. But when it stops, you can't differentiate it from the stars around it. That it had happened before where I was talking about it and then I saw it and I mentioned that. I said, sometimes when you're talking about these things or thinking about them, you'll actually see them. And as soon as I said that, this little dot comes doing all these crazy maneuvers. And I was like, what if it's here for us? Like, because I was just talking about it. And the second I said that, it stopped dead directly above us. And, it looked exactly like a star. And so, a couple of months later, I was walking down the driveway of my friend's. No. I was working there. I was trimming pot at this guy's house. And I had a drummer in my band that was like an older lady, older hippie lady. And we were walking down the driveway and we had just been talking about all this weird stuff while we were sitting around trimming. Cause that's what happens. You're just sitting there trimming pot for hours and just talking about weird shit, getting stoned. And so we were walking on the driveway and I started telling her like, sometimes you'll be talking about these things and you'll actually see them. And I'm looking at her and I see her eyes and she's looking up at the sky. So I follow her line of sight and I see one of those things again, doing all these weird ass maneuvers, flying around all crazy. And I was stunned that I was telling her, sometimes you talk about them and then you'll see them and there they are again. So this theme of certain people being telepathically connected to these aliens doesn't really sit very well with me because I have a lot of issues with it. Like why do they care? They don't have anything better to do to sit around guiding the fate of humanity. You know what I mean? What is their agenda really? And I've also thought that maybe Terrence McKenna was right, that these things are real, but they're not real in the same way that the IRS is real. They are somehow projections of the collective unconscious. I've considered that as a possible answer for this. It's hard then to explain, why is it that she saw it first? You know what I mean? So, multiple people seeing these things. And then also in Durango, Colorado that night, what did we have? We had my friend, the pot grower, his son, my girlfriend and I, Joe. Wasn't there one other person? Oh, and Topher. 6 people that all saw these things on the same night, described them the same way. And I was the only connection that they had to each other. So it's no way they talked about it or anything. It's just not possible. They didn't know each other. I was the only common denominator. So, it's a little bit hard to dismiss this stuff or to imagine that it's just a projection of the unconscious when it's witnessed by a bunch of people in the same town on the same night. There's just a lot of stuff here that difficult to write off, but it gets worse or better depending on how you're thinking about this subject, I guess. And so remember the purple demon geisha alien thing that I had a vision of driving home from the Star Tribe meeting? That thing re-enters the story now. So a few months after this incident where I was walking down the driveway with my drummer and we saw that little craft, or had a group hallucination, whatever the hell it is. I'm trying to think the first incident of this, I was playing my guitar and my girlfriend was in the room. I was practicing and she said, I didn't want to mention this to you, but sometimes when you're really, really focused and you're playing, I see this sort of bluish purple horned entity floating behind you. And I'm like, okay, so Satan is my spirit animal. It's totally metal. I'm into it. And I didn't really think too much of it. I mean, it just seems silly. But then, and he might even be watching right now. Dustin, if you're out there, you can go ahead and verify this for me. But Dustin didn't know her either. They didn't talk. It was maybe a month or so later, and I was playing with Dustin and my bass player Brian, and he goes, "Man, I got to tell you something. 3 times now, when you're playing the guitar, I've seen this like purple, like demon thing behind you." And then it got weird because I'm like, okay, these are 2 people that now are describing this thing floating behind me when I'm playing the guitar. So what in the actual fuck? And maybe a few days after that, I went down to this bar called Wheels, and I was playing, and as I was leaving, this Maori kid stops me, and he goes, "Hey, man, I got to tell you something. There's this purple," I'm like, "Yeah, demon thing floating behind me when I play guitar." And his eyes got all big, and he's like, "You know about this?" And I'm like, "I guess, man. And I've developed an ability to kind of take these things in stride. If you guys have followed my channel, you know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these kind of experiences, or at least a variation of them, I guess, that doesn't involve aliens, but heavy synchronicity and that kind of thing, and telepathy and whatnot. I have to have a sort of flip attitude about it just to maintain a objective and to keep my sanity together. So I just didn't really give it that much weight. I was like, man, that's weird. So I go to South America a few months later, and one night I drink ayahuasca with this guy that I've been drinking ayahuasca with for, a few weeks at this point. And I'm walking along, and suddenly that purple demon geisha thing is in front of me. And Pachamama, the ayahuasca narrator, says, "You remember this?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "Would you like to know what it is?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, you know how in physics they say that a particle can be the same particle, not 2 different particles, but the same particle can be in 2 places at once. Your soul is the same. And so this is actually you, but it's you as you exist on a gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf star because of the influence of the other 2 stars." And she goes on to talk about how they transmit this these teachings around the universe and all this stuff. And so again, I'm like, kind of trying to take this with a grain of salt, but it did occur to me that this is what everyone had been seeing, that this thing was, purple and had horns, and that's what Dustin said, and that's what Sarah said, and that's what the Maori kid said. And now I'm standing there looking at it, and I realize that it's the creature that I had, or the alien, or whatever it is that I had this vision of when I was leaving the Star Tribe conference all those years before. And so I took Pachamama's description of this, and I went into the tent, and when the talking stick was passed around, I told everyone about it. Which was important because when I finally looked it up, there were 2 people that heard me talk about it that night that were present, which really helps when there are people to corroborate your experience when your experience gets this ridiculous and out there. But I found out 3 things eventually. One of the discoveries was only a few months ago, but I guess it was maybe like 10 days or so after the ceremony. I thought, well, I should Google this and see if I'm able to corroborate, do astrophysicists or astronomers or whatever know that this is, that this is a fact. And so I found a paper that said that they're the 3rd object in the Sirius A and B binary star system. It should have been trinary, I guess. But they think the influence of the 2 stars restricted the development of the 3rd, what would be star, and it remained a gas giant. So everything that I was told by ayahuasca turned out to be true, and the paper wasn't published until like 5 days after the ceremony. So I didn't even have the collective mind to draw it out of. So that really struck me as something, that I had received this information, and then I was able to confirm that it was actually true. And so I can't remember how I came across this next bit, this next piece of the puzzle, but I was thinking, well, I should try to see if there's anything that I can find, any mention in the occult literature or whatever of these beings. And sure enough, I find Anne Bailey, I think was her name, Helena Blavatsky's like #1 student. It was either Alice Bailey or Anne Bailey. I can never remember. She wrote a lot of really good books. She was a very, very, very intelligent woman. She wrote like a treatise on white magic and a bunch of stuff. And I found, it might even be on her Wikipedia page, a description of these beings from Sirius that transmit this knowledge exactly, I mean, almost word for word, what Pachamama had told me. I found in the writings of this occultist lady. So, there we are with another level of weird piled on to this already bizarre Sunday. And there's another bit that makes it all that much weirder. Not only do the Hopi have the blue star prophecy, right? The Freemasons, the blue star in their lodge represents Sirius. And, oh no. I hope you guys didn't miss too much of that because I just noticed that I was frozen. Looks like a storm is coming in. Alice Bailey. So the blue star in the Masonic lodges is also Sirius. And then the Hopi have the blue star, but the Hopi also identify people who keep the secret knowledge with the secret handshake, just like the Freemasons. And so, we have the same star with the same significance in two completely disparate cultures. And they also identify other people that know about this with secret handshakes. So, there we go. Up, and now we have 33 concurrent viewers as we're talking about a Masonic secret. You know what I mean? So there's a little synchronicity for you. So then I post this video about the Hopi prophecy. And it's just remarkably accurate. If you haven't seen that video, you should go back and watch it. So, where was I at with? Oh yeah. So then I find out, after I posted that video that the Sequoia, who are an ayahuasca drinking tribe here, actually, say the same thing, that when they drink ayahuasca, they receive information from Sirius. So that pretty much brings us up to the current juncture. I mean, I'm sure I've forgotten some details, some elements of these stories that are interesting. But, all of that taken together is just, it's pretty compelling. I mean, of course, you have to assume that I'm not making it all up. But a lot of it you can actually confirm for yourselves. The Sequoia thing and a lot of those other details. But I'm taking it at this point to mean that, I've said for years that the only thing I think that could change the trajectory of mankind at this point is alien intervention. And, I also received this message that I'm well aware at this point a lot of other people have received. The guy in the Tool album was also of the opinion that these things were interdimensionals and not actual aliens, which could mean that there's some manifestation of consciousness, like Terrence McKenna said, which does not stop them from presenting themselves to humanity. Because, I wasn't the only one that saw them that night. And the fact that we're on the edge of World War III, the oceans are 90% dead compared to 1970, right? 90% of the shit that was in the ocean, the animals, the creatures, the fish, they're gone that were there in 1970. 90%. Forget about global warming. It's controversial. Let's just not even consider it. But the rainforest is almost gone. I've been talking in my last stream about how you can drive around in the rainforest and not hit any bugs at night. You have nothing on your windshield because they're all dead because of pesticides. The rainforest is vanishing. Did I mention that we're on the verge of World War III? You know what I mean? So it does, in fact, with this combination of events where we have, sightings that are not just like civilians, but cops. They're at a Russian base or somewhere in Eastern Europe. A bunch of ranking U.S. officers on the base witnessed a glowing red eyeball in a triangle. That's how they described it. And there was like 30 witnesses or something. And they said it was floating around above the forest and dripping some like red molten crap out of it. And they testified. There's video of that you can find. It was like a military tribunal or whatever. All these guys were willing to give their testimony in regards to having witnessed this. And now we have this family that claims that there's 8 to 10 foot beings, in their driveway, and cops that got the crash of those same beings apparently on their body cam. It just really seems like it could be true. That what we were told, that at the very last moment, and this appears to be the 11th hour, that these ETs or interdimensionals or whatever the hell they are, is indeed going to intervene and change the trajectory. And, I think it's difficult for us to imagine exactly what that would mean. But there are a couple of extremely important details. One of them being that if aliens are indeed here, we're not in charge. It's already been taken over. I think it's safe to say that if they're capable of coming here, there's nothing we could do to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, whether they're good or bad. If they are indeed here, they're already totally taken over. There's no way that we could fight them if that's what we needed to do. And there's, of course, very mixed opinion. We have evolutionary biologists that say that there's just no reason that they would come here unless they're hostile, in the sense that they need something here, maybe just a new planet to inhabit, in which case, they want to get rid of us or enslave us or whatever. The only reason that I'm inclined to say that I don't think that's the case is that we're still here. There's no reason, if there are hostile aliens, to wait. Because if they wanted to, they could just take over and kill everyone or enslave everyone immediately. And there's no reason to just sit around, being weird and messing with illumignostic and his friends and just generally being just weirdos. You know what I mean? There's no reason for that. So the idea that they could even be almost like astral projections from beings that aren't actually physically here, that do have some kind of good intentions, I definitely am leaning towards that. The one thing I'm confused about, though, is like, why do they have crafts if they're just jetting around in their light bodies? There are still some pretty unanswerable questions. And one thing that's for certain is that they're not here to get gold. You can write that theory off as completely just ridiculous, because we can transmute lead into gold or other elements into other elements in a laboratory at this point. And if we can do it, so can aliens. So that story, I always thought, there's no reason. There are meteors out there that you could land on that are made of solid gold. There's absolutely no reason to come here and take gold. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's not it. 100% that's not it. The one thing that I think may be true about that, and it's important to remember this, that our mind and consciousness, even the universe itself, like some woman wrote that all that is metaphor. And I've always really liked that, and I feel like it's literally true. It's almost like a structural element of the universe. And so this idea that they are after gold, which is a metaphor for consciousness, a higher consciousness is symbolized by gold, partly because it doesn't corrode. The sun is where we get our light and life, and therefore where we also get our consciousness. And so, there are good reasons why gold is a metaphor for higher consciousness. I've often said that I feel like mankind thinks that they're pursuing the gold just because it's gold, But I think what's actually happening is there's this deep intuitive drive to pursue higher consciousness. And because it's a symbol of that, that's what actually gives it its value. But people just don't understand what they're after. But the thing that I'm getting at is that the idea that aliens are after gold could have something to do with the fact that whatever these are trying to influence our consciousness. That's the actual relationship, the underlying theme. But it's not the physical gold. That's just too silly. So, you know what? I don't think I have anything else to say about that. I'm going to check the chat and see if there are any like questions or anything I should respond to. Oh, and I mean, there are a few other things around the planet. I mean, of course, I didn't go through every single bit of evidence, but one of the most interesting things to me, and this actually has, again, a relationship to Sirius. There's also the book Cosmic Trigger, which is about telepathic communication between Sirius, an alien in Sirius, and Robert Anton Wilson, who is one of the most brilliant human beings to ever live. And if I was an alien, that's who I would be communicating with, probably. Of course, later he said that he had just gone insane and not to take any of it seriously. But after he published that book, one of his daughters was beaten to death. And I think that it's possible that he didn't want that to happen to his living daughter. So, you know, because the actual title of the book was Cosmic Trigger, The Final Secret of the Illuminati. And it is published in plain language in that book. So, you know, who knows? But at any rate, I forgot to mention that we were talking about telepathy and Sirius and all that. But there's also the Dogon tribe in Africa, and they have a star chart. I believe it's actually 7 star charts, or it's a star chart of 7 systems, up to 7 systems away. Like basically, we just saw this with the Hubble telescope pretty recently. And no one can explain that. Of course, anthropologists have gone over there and tried to say like, oh, well, they must have, you know, I don't know how they're saying I don't know what the hell, you know, they try to explain it away, but how are you going to explain that away? And they actually claim to have received cannabis, which is the most biologically sophisticated plant on Earth, which lends at least a little bit of credibility to the idea that, you know, if you have more advanced plant life, it kind of implies that evolution has been happening longer. So if it's coming from an advanced race of living beings, that they would have more advanced plants, that they had bred and engineered also to protect them from radiation, to be neuroprotective, to provide all this different medicine like the terpenoid profile and the cannabinoids in cannabis do, it kind of seems like makes sense. And so the Dogon say that they received cannabis from this race of aliens from Sirius. So we just, you know, it's like everywhere you look, all around the planet, you know, my experience, and a lot of it is the most compelling situations that we have. You know, it all seems to be emanating from Sirius. If the New Agers are to be taken seriously, you know, they'll all tell you that the Sirius aliens are evil and bad, and I generally just kind of like write off everything that New Agers say, so I'm not really concerned about that. Again, if there were hostile forces here of you know, this super evolved stature, we would have no chance. We would be done for already. You know what I mean? It doesn't really make sense. The same thing stands for interdimensional entities that people say are like parasitical or evil. If that was the case, we'd be gone already. How are you going to fight an invisible enemy that's way more advanced than you, that, you know, you don't even, most people wouldn't even detect it? You know, I mean, I know we're not doing super well as a race, but it just doesn't vibe. You know, it does not pass the vibe check. It's just, and also, there have been numerous studies all over the planet, all kinds of different cultures over the years, on this. And the only people that are affected by these beings are from cultures that believe in them, that at least some part of the culture, they have the idea present in the culture. So, it seems to me that if, lack of belief is enough to negate the effect, it's just delusion. It's not real. Either way, you're better off not believing in it, right? Because it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that 0% of people that don't believe in negative entities are affected by them. 0%. Absolute proof. So I think that if you're worried about the alien invasion, I would just consider the fact that we're still here. We're still at least marginally free. It could also be true that one of the reasons we're seeing such a powerful push from the governments to control people and to limit freedom and to increase surveillance is that once these aliens are totally out of the closet, people are going to lose their shit. A lot of people are going to go ballistic. And so it could be that to some extent they are taking some measures to kind of get things under control before this event occurs, that is definitely going to cause some craziness. Personally, I don't know why. I think it's awesome. I don't mind aliens being here at all. I don't see what the issue is exactly. And again, I don't think I got into this. I mentioned it, but I didn't like flesh it out. It's difficult for us to even imagine what kind of innovations, assuming that these aliens are good, the kind of innovations and influence governmental systems, monetary systems, the truth about the origin of the universe, and there's just so much that could possibly be transferred to the human race from a race of aliens that, could be millions of years older than ours and perhaps evolved along different lines. So their priorities are completely different. One of the goals of modern civilization has been to de-emphasize struggle and to elevate ourselves above the nephesh, the animal level of soul, and to transcend, the restrictions or the strictures imposed on us by the necessities of survival, to extricate ourselves from the demands and pressures of civilized life. And once that is accomplished, we're able to focus on the things that actually matter, like innovations in music and art and philosophy and literature and all of these things that actually make humanity worth preserving. And, it would be the end goal of a positive influence on our consciousness or, a more evolved race to share that knowledge with us and to help us to change our trajectory, because it is extraordinarily unfortunate that so much human potential has already been squandered because we have such perverse governmental and economic systems that we really are creating a deranged populace, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and crazier and crazier and crazier. And people are less and less tolerant and more hypocritical and delusional. It's just, as it seems like every day that goes by, people are a little bit crazier in general and a little bit more afraid. Although, on a positive note, while we're on the subject, I have noticed that a lot of the people that got really mad at me a few years ago for talking about how both parties were controlled by the same people actually agree with me now. There was one person that sent me a nasty letter and canceled his patronage, that just took us on an all expenses paid trip into the deep jungle to show his appreciation for my content. So it seems apparent that he's gotten over it, and we talked about it a little bit, and he was like, yeah, I can't even tell who I hate more anymore. So, that's a big shift for someone that, got that angry with me, even though they like my content that much, to get over it to that extent, is pretty remarkable. And I'm hoping that process will continue. And we can assume that it actually will. There's a couple of components that need to be in place in order for humanity to enter into a transcendental modality of consciousness as a collective. And there are some tools in the universe that can actually help us to do that. One of them is music. As silly as that might seem, it is a great way to actually transfer consciousness from one being to another. And that's actually what it does. Assuming that the right people are playing the music. This is something that is like basically the basis of shamanism all around the world. The Grateful Dead understood it. Tool understands it. And so one of the reasons that works is a little thing called entrainment. And so if you have two pulses of any type, electromagnetic, musical, whatever they are, the lower tends to entrain with the higher. And so when we have people that are evolving their consciousness to higher and higher oscillations, it's pulling the net of being, the net of consciousness along with it. Because we are all indeed one mind and one soul divided so that we may experience union. One soul divided that union may come. And so as we raise that the prima mobile, the highest oscillation among us, it drags the rest of us with it. The problem is, and I actually realized this because of a situation where this kid was raised with chimpanzees, and I thought, okay, so why did the kid take on the characteristics of the monkeys instead of the monkey consciousness and training with the human? And then I realized that it's because of the numbers. And so looking that up, it turns out that if there are enough people pulling downwards, it will override a single individual, for example, pulling upwards. So one of the requirements that we have to meet in order to make this work, the raising of consciousness in a straight line upwards, is that there must be more and more people. So you can take heart in the fact that if you're doing it and you're doing it effectively and efficiently and you're doing it for real, you are pulling the people around you up. And that's the issue right now. We do not represent the majority. And so we cannot really get the momentum to pull the race higher until we have greater numbers. But I think what we're seeing now is this transition. And it all makes sense. The necessity of the dissolution of order so that we can have chaos, which allows for the reconfiguration of the constituent parts. They take another form. They must have space for movement, and this is what chaos creates. And so we have gone through this extremely turbulent period, and what happens after that is a new level of order and symmetry emerges from the chaos. This is the old solvet coagula, order out of chaos, slogan, I guess, of the initiated. And so chaos, new order emerges from that chaos. And you can see it if you look throughout history. And every time there is some degree of improvement. If you look at the last great social upheaval that happened in the 1960s, there were a lot of improvements that came out of that over time. Of course, right now it's less obvious that progress has been made. But I think it's fair to say that we're going through a much larger sort of cycle of that same process. And so once we emerge from it on the other side, it's going to be that much more progress that has been made. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I'm going to jump over to my secret stream with my patrons. If you'd like to join us, you just join at the $10 level. We do this usually about 4 times a month, and we are chewing through Masonic degree number 28. We're almost finished with it, but when you become a patron, you have access to all 4 years of the secret content. Also, I did finally launch my music channel. There's only one video on it, but it is very helpful if you guys would go over and subscribe so I could get it moving. There's going to be content there that's not available anywhere else. And It's at TripTracks1111. That's how you can find it on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I'm going to eat some mushrooms in a little while, and I got to get this secret stream done first, so I got to go. But I'll see you again very soon. Hit the like button, please. Share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, and I'll see you again in the next stream.